Think about the last time you boarded a flight. You checked in, sat down, and a few hours later, you were on the other side of the planet. Zero navigation, zero planning, zero risk. But 65,000 years ago, a group of humans looked at a stretch of open ocean with no visible end, no GPS, no metal tools, no compass. And they crossed it anyway, not just once, thousands of times, across thousands of miles, reaching islands so remote that even modern sailors find them difficult to locate. So how did they do it? How did a species with no instruments, no written maps, and no understanding of longitude become the greatest ocean navigators in the history of the planet? The answer isn't one method. It's a collection of strategies, so sophisticated, so precise, and so deeply intelligent that modern scientists are still recovering the evidence of them today. Let's start with the most counterintuitive navigation method ever devised, the one that required no instruments whatsoever. For decades, historians assumed ancient Pacific navigators must have had some form of physical tool to cross thousands of miles of featureless ocean. Then researchers began documenting the surviving knowledge of master navigators from Micronesia and Polynesia. And what they found was staggering. The entire Pacific Ocean had been mapped inside the human mind. Traditional wayfinders memorized the rising and setting positions of over 200 stars across the horizon, organized into a mental compass with 32 precise points of direction. This wasn't approximate. It was accurate enough to navigate from Hawaii to Tahiti, a journey of 2,500 miles across open ocean, with a precision that rivals modern GPS. In 1976, a master navigator named Maupialug from the island of Satawal proved this by sailing a traditional double-hulled canoe from Hawaii to Tahiti without a single instrument. Not once did he consult a map, a compass, or a clock. The entire journey was read from the sky above him. But stars are useless when the sky is overcast. And ancient navigators had a solution for that too. One so unusual that modern scientists initially struggled to believe it was real. In the Marshall Islands, archaeologists recovered unusual objects made of sticks and shells tied together in complex patterns. For years, these were misidentified as decorative art. They were actually three-dimensional maps. Not maps of land, but maps of invisible forces moving through the ocean. Different islands deflect and refract ocean swells in completely predictable patterns, and the stick charts encoded those patterns, teaching navigators how the ocean felt differently depending on which island was within range. The technique was entirely physical, not visual. Navigators would lie flat on the floor of the canoe and feel the rhythm of the swells moving through the hull against their own body. By reading subtle changes in wave direction and frequency through their skin, they could identify which island lay over the horizon up to 80 kilometers before it ever became visible to the eye. Some navigators didn't look at the sky or feel the ocean at all. They watched animals. The golden plover migrates every year from Alaska to Hawaii, a nonstop flight of over 4,800 kilometers across open ocean. Ancient Polynesian navigators tracked its flight path and followed it. They understood that this bird never landed in open water, which meant its direction of travel pointed directly toward land. The frigate bird was equally precise. It never rests on the ocean's surface, which means any frigate bird spotted in the middle of the Pacific must have departed from land within roughly 80 kilometers. Navigators also released captured birds at sea and watched the direction they flew. A bird released with no land in sight always flies directly toward the nearest shore. This was a living compass that functioned through cloud cover, through storms, and through the darkest nights. But before we go any further, tell us in the comments which country are you watching this from. Now, let's get into it. Now here is where the methods become genuinely extraordinary, because the next innovation didn't come from observation at all. It came from engineering. The outrigger canoe, a single hull with a lateral float connected by two beams extending from the side of the boat, looks deceptively simple. The physics it solves are not. A standard canoe in open ocean is dangerously unstable. Any lateral force from wind or waves creates a tipping moment that risks capsizing the vessel. The outrigger float eliminates that instability by generating counterbalancing resistance that increases exponentially the further the float is positioned from the hull. This allowed navigators to catch crosswinds and sail at angles that would have overturned any conventional boat. What makes this discovery genuinely remarkable is that it was made independently in multiple locations. Near-identical outrigger designs appeared separately in Taiwan, Madagascar, the Indian Ocean coast, and across the Pacific, among populations with no documented contact with each other. The ocean posed a specific engineering problem. Entirely separate human minds arrived at the exact same optimal solution. Of all the crossings ancient humans ever made, one stands apart from the rest, and its implications are still debated today. Reaching Australia required crossing a minimum of 90 kilometers of open ocean, a stretch of water that never closed, even during the ice ages when sea levels dropped and land bridges formed elsewhere. In 2023, a genetic study published in Nature confirmed that the ancestors of Aboriginal Australians made this crossing as a deliberate and organized migration at least 65,000 years ago. Not an accidental drift, but the deeper shock is older still. On the island of Flores in Indonesia, archaeologists found stone tools buried beneath volcanic ash dated to between 800,000 and 1 million years ago. At that time, Flores was already an island, separated from the nearest landmass by at least 19 kilometers of open ocean that geological records confirm never closed. The tools were made by Homo erectus, a species that predates modern humans by hundreds of thousands of years. Something that was not fully human, had no language as we understand it, and left no evidence of boats, deliberately crossed open ocean and survived. The crossing happened. The method remains unknown. Of all the tools ancient navigators possessed, the most powerful was the one they could never leave behind: the human body itself. At sea, the human sensory system demonstrated capabilities that had evolved on land but proved astonishingly precise on the ocean. The human eye can detect the greenish tint that shallow reef water creates at the surface from several kilometers away. Specific cloud formations build consistently over islands, even when no land is visible, because islands generate their own localized weather through heat and moisture rising from the surface. The smell of vegetation and soil can be detected at sea up to 40 kilometers from a coastline under the right wind conditions. Phosphorescent plankton, which glows blue-green when disturbed at night, appears in different concentrations near underwater reef systems. Ancient navigators processed all of these signals simultaneously, building a continuous picture of the invisible ocean landscape that no single instrument could have replicated. And then humans took every one of these methods and multiplied them by doing something no other navigator in history had ever done. They encoded the knowledge in song. Polynesian navigation chants stored precise astronomical data, island coordinates expressed as sequences of star paths, seasonal wind shift timings, and ocean current descriptions inside rhythmic verses engineered for perfect memorization across generations. When European explorers entered the Pacific in the 18th century, they encountered populations living on islands so precisely located within millions of square kilometers of open ocean that the navigators aboard European ships, equipped with chronometers and sextants, could not explain how those islands had originally been found. The explorer James Cook, one of the most accomplished maritime navigators in recorded history, wrote in his journal that Polynesian navigators possessed knowledge of the Pacific that exceeded his own. And at some point, ancient humans made one final decision that extended their reach across the ocean beyond anything their own senses could sustain alone. They brought life with them. Chickens, pigs, and dogs were carried aboard outrigger canoes as living food sources capable of sustaining a crew through voyages lasting weeks across empty water. Genetic analysis of Pacific chicken populations published in 2023 confirmed that domesticated chickens arrived on the coast of South America before any European contact, carried there by Polynesian navigators who had crossed the Pacific from west to east and returned home. A deliberate round trip across the largest ocean on Earth, completed before any European sailor had ventured beyond the side of the Mediterranean coast. Go back to that flight. The instrument panel in the cockpit contains GPS receivers linked to satellites orbiting 20,000 kilometers above the Earth, radar systems, inertial navigation computers, and redundant digital banks, all designed to solve the same problem ancient navigators solved without any of it. The star compass that required no paper, the wave map read through the body of a canoe, the bird released at sea that always flew home, the chant that carried the coordinates of an island 4,000 kilometers away inside 30 words, the outrigger that solved in wood and rope what took modern engineers centuries to understand in steel. Each of these methods was built by people who had never seen a written map, never heard the word mathematics, and had nothing to work with except the sky above them, the ocean beneath them, and everything the person before them had managed to remember. The most astonishing thing about what they achieved isn't how far they traveled, it's how precisely they always knew where they were going.